What's going on, guys? Ronin here. So this video is going to be a little bit different than what you normally see on the channel, and it's something that some of you may or may not like to see. Whether it's your cup of tea or not, that's completely up to you. But there is another subject besides Pokemon that I've been very passionate about in the past. I actually spent a lot of years in this subject, going to professional events and playing as highly competitively as I possibly could. And that is the subject of Yu-Gi-Oh! About 2 weeks ago in Las Vegas, we had a regional, and the regional wasn't very big. It was over the course of EDC weekend, which is the main draw for Las Vegas, but it was about 117, 120 players, something like that. And I, for some reason, decided it would be a good idea to go. Now, for those of you who don't know, I used to play all the time, but when COVID happened and the world stopped, I kind of stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I hadn't really played anything in a competitive sense or in a real life event in over 3 years. And when I heard about this regional, my first thought was, well, I don't really know much about the meta, but it might be fun to go and see some old friends. Then I started going, well, is there anything that I can actually play? Because I don't want to just go to a tournament to see some people, but then I got to watch them play because there's not really any fun in that. Then I started going through all of my old stuff to see if I had a viable strategy to put together before I entered this tournament. Because all of my stuff kind of really isn't meta relevant. Hasn't been for, well, 3 years. And I wanted to see if there's anything that I can really put together to try and compete in this tournament. Well, after some digging around in my box of Yu-Gi-Oh cards and some last minute playtesting online, I was able to come up with something that was able to allow me to play at the event under the current ban list without many restrictions. And I figured, since how you guys haven't really gotten to see this side of me, I would bring it to you because I had a lot of fun doing it. Even though I don't really play Yu-Gi-Oh anymore, it was a nice reprieve to get away from YouTube for a little while and do something that wasn't Pokemon related. Even though I love Pokemon and it's something that I've been involved with since the beginning, Yu-Gi-Oh has always been one of those things that I've enjoyed doing in my pastime to help relieve stress or just, turn off your brain for a little while. Do things that you wouldn't normally do. So, without further ado, I want to give you guys a deck profile of what I played at the Las Vegas Regional, and then talk about what I did and my matches and why I decided to play this certain deck. So let's get into it. Alright, you guys are going to have to excuse the setup because I'm not really set up to do Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profiles. It's something that I never really intended on doing, but I thought this would be kind of fun to do in the midst of things, considering it's something that I've never really shown you guys. So, after going through all my cards, I was able to come up with a strategy of one of the decks that I really enjoyed playing. I played this at a competitive level. I played it at the 2017 North American World Championship qualifier. I played it in a couple of regionals, and it's one of the most efficient decks for the Xyz mechanic. And that deck is Zoodiac. Now, the Zoodiac deck hasn't really been competitively viable in a long time. Not since they lost their main interruption card, which is DIDNT. DIDNT is one of those cards that it's because of how small the Zoodiac engine is and because of how easily accessible the cards on the extra deck are. It's one of those things that gets splashed into a lot of decks, especially when it comes to a format where multiple engines from different archetypes or just different cards in general can be squeezed into. DIDNT is a really great interruption, but once they ban it, Zoodiac kind of lost all of its flair. But what I did do is I went through all my cards and I figured out that I had a really good going second strategy for it. Based upon the current format and the current meta that's going on, it was basically just let my opponent go first no matter what happened, so that way I can prevent them from building the best board possible, and then I can go through and break it. But with all that being said, let's get into the card choices and I'll talk about some of the things that I played. Alright, so first things first, we're going to start off with, we're going to do things from over here. You'll have to excuse the quality of the camera because it's not that great, just a webcam. But so I played 3 Zoodiac Thoroughblade, 3 Zoodiac Whiptail, and 3 Zoodiac Ramram. So these cards are basically the essential part of the Zoodiac archetype. Currently in the current meta, the reason for it is because Thoroughblade offers attack points. Whiptail offers a clear of a monster if it's attached to a Zoodiac Xyz or a Beast Warrior Xyz. And then Ramram is very important because one of the hand traps that's running around right now is infinite impermanence. And if they target one of your Xyz, mainly the Borbo that allows you to complete a direct attack, then you can detach this and negate the effect, which did come up in the tournament a couple of times, which allowed me to actually make the plays to get through. You don't really activate Thoroughblade's effect to draw because Drone Lockbird is something that's effective in the meta, and you also don't want to waste your Zoodiac cards because they're not extenders in this format, they're all starters, and you need a follow-up for the next turn, so you kind of want to keep an additional Zoodiac in your hand if you have it, unless unless you're in an extremely simplified game state. But overall, they performed great. The only thing that I would change is I would cut down on the ratios of both the Ram Ram and the Thoroughblade, and I would trade them out for Bunny Blast. And the reason for it is, and I didn't realize this until mid-tournament, but there's a deck going around currently that's called Runic, and they're all quick play spells that target. And while I didn't personally have to play it, the fact that they can target an extra deck Xyz monster and negate the effect and destroy it, if I would have come up against that, it would have stopped my plays cold, and I wouldn't have been able to really do anything. I would have had to pass turn. So that was one thing that I wanted to make sure that I would update going forward, just in case I were to play this deck again at any type of event. But that's all for the Zoodiac cards. Or, I'm sorry, it was only 9 total, but it's still one of the best Xyz engines in the game. The next thing that I played was the Kaiju package. Now, Kaiju packages are one of those things that are really niche, and they come out in certain formats. This format just so happens to be one of those because they have a lot of cards like Kashtira where you can't break their boards due to one of their monsters being protected by card effects or being protected from destruction, and another one who's basically a quick play that allows you to banish an opponent's card on their turn. And it's not a hard once per turn as long as they have 3 materials. So it's something that you want to make sure you can interrupt. Kaiju is the perfect way to deal with that because they don't destroy, they don't target, you just tribute off their monster and it clears the board, which is exactly something you want to do. So these things were really good over the course of the day. They did exactly what I needed them to do, which was to break boards whenever I came across something like that. The next cards that I played were 2 Alpha, Master of the Beasts, and then I also played 1 Pankratops, Dino Wrestler Pankratops. The reason I played the Pankratops is because it's effectively just an Alpha, but it allows you to, at spell speed 2, which allows you to activate in reaction to something, clear a card off of the field. So effectively, this card could clear 2 if you make it to the battle phase because you can attack 1, and then you contribute it off to attack another. Alpha is there specifically because if you put a Kaiju to your opponent's side of the field and you summon this, then you can bounce that Kaiju back to your hand with this, and then if your opponent still has more attack points than you have, you could resummon it just at the cost of a direct attack. It's essentially good for maintaining board state and keeping the game state simplified, so that way you can keep your Kaijus in their hand just in case you need to clear something hard. And also the fact that it's 8 stars and it's 3,000 came up a couple of times. That's it for the monsters that actually did the heavy lifting. The next thing that I played were just a bunch of hand traps because that's what Zoodiac's good for. So what we played here was 2 Nib, 2 Droll, and then 3 Ash. The reason for that is because you want to force your opponent into a game state to where they're going to end on a subpar board, and you have to use minimum resources to clear it, which is what ended up happening a lot of the time. So Nibiru does that as long as you can, the deck's choke point, you can Nibiru them, clear their entire field, and then just give them a really big token that you'll be able to deal with in the next turn by one of your Zoodiac monsters or by a Kaiju. This is one of those formats to where a lot of searching happens, so Droll is kind of a necessity. You want to shut down their searching as much as possible, and as long as you know the right time to hit a certain deck at a certain point, you can force them into the subpar board and kind of get them into a point to where they have to commit and next turn just blow out all the resource. And then Ash is Ash. It hits basically any card that interacts with the deck, which is something you want. You want them not to really gain momentum. That's it for the monsters. Next, we just played typical cards. 3 Fire Formation Tenki. This card is specifically for the Zoodiac. It ups your count from 9 to 12, which is over a quarter of the deck. Then we had 3 Interrupt Your Kaiju Slumber. One of the best things about this card is if they end on a subpar board and you feel like they may have a hand trap and you want to get the advantage, this is perfect hand trap bait, because if they hand trap it now and you can't blow up their field, it's fine because your Zoodiac can follow up, and then the next turn you can banish this from the graveyard to get the Kaiju to your hand. So either way, they're going to lose value off of that, and you don't really lose anything, which is one of my favorite things about it. The next thing is a couple of defensive things. So 3 Book of Moon, it's the most defensive and reactionary thing that I could think of in my collection that could help break boards. So this card is at 3. I played Yu-Gi-Oh back when this being at 3 was like one of the most punishing things in the format, and it really showed me that even though it's an older card and there are other versions of it out there, it still has its place in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, and it helped me break several boards or prevent myself from getting killed during a game. Next we have Consistency, 2 Pot of Desires. Banish the top 10, draw 2. Zoodiac always wants card advantage, so that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure I did. And then 2 Lightning Storm. These in conjunction with a Kaiju or an Interrupted Kaiju Slumber were some of the best things because you could use this to blow out back row, or it can blow out monsters that are in attack mode. It was one of the things that was vital for allowing me to play the game, especially when my opponent established a board that was not their best, but not the worst thing that they can do. This helped me deal with the issues, so I'm glad that I had this in there. And then the last 3 cards were 3 Hand Traps. Infinite Permanence. It's one of those cards that's predominant in formats when you need to stop effects that are resolving on the field. This is one of them. Played right, it allows you to really force your opponent into an awkward state, especially when they're trying to gain some type of advantage on you. And it's one of those things that you can also set, and it can act as a negate if you play it right in the right column. So that was it for the main deck. It was 41 cards. I don't really like 40, and 41 just always feels right to me. Then we'll follow up with the extra deck. So the name of the game for Zoodiac is the extra deck. While the main deck is really small, the extra deck does eat up a lot of space. So you want to make sure you maximize out on your Zoodiac cards. Now, a lot of these have a primary function, but they're mostly just there to establish materials. The 2 most important ones are Borobo and the Tiger Mortar. The reason why Borobo is important is because this is the crux of your strategy. Being able to establish this and attack directly is important because in main phase 2 it allows you to establish a big monster that has the ability to wipe the board. And in a simplified game state, when they have 1 to 2 cards in their hand, if you can wipe an established board, they're gonna have a hard time following up the next turn, especially when there's another board wipe. Tiger Mortar is another one of those things that allows you to establish things. So the one thing about the Zoodiac cards is the Xyz gain effects and they gain attack and defense based upon the materials that are under them that are from the main deck. So this could easily become 2,000-3,000 by stacking up the normal Xyz monster or the normal Zoodiac monsters from the main deck, and it could help enable some OTKs. And then Chalkanine can also help enable OTKs because it puts a regular Zoodiac monster to the main monster zone, but it doesn't allow them to be attached as Xyz material for the turn. And then Hammer Kong is just there because you need a name to help get the materials going. You don't always want to just stack up on a Borobo and this because you want something that's just generic, that's just there for the filler spot, because everything else has its place to a second function, which is what you really want. So that is it for the Zoodiac Xyz cards. The next one and the main part of the extra deck that you really want to establish is AA Sky Thunder Zeus. AA Divine Arsenal Zeus, should I say. So this thing is probably the only reason why this deck is playable right now. And the reason for it is because once you've battled with an Xyz monster, it doesn't matter if it's dealt damage, just as long as it's battled, which is why Borobo is so important, because Borobo allows you to attack directly. It doesn't matter if it has Xyz material on it. As long as it can complete an attack, you can overlay onto this. And that's what's important, because this at quick effect speed during your opponent's turn or your turn, you can detach 2 materials and wipe the entire board, excluding this card, which means it's the only thing that's left playable, which is really important in a simplified game state, which is what this deck is built to do. You really want to force your opponent into a point to where they have to interact with this, and if they can't break this card before they interact with it, they're probably going to lose, which is the whole point of this. And then the fact that it's got 3,000 attack, your first attack on the first turn is probably going to be minuscule, 16 at most, 4 at least, but it's a gateway to this, because after that you can snowball this into something more aggressive, and it allows you to really take control of the duel within a couple of turns, which, as the type of player that I am, I'm better at the slow game than trying to just build a big board of negates and hoping my opponent can't break it. I much more value technical play over than anything. So that's the main monster. Then the last one is Drill Driver Vespanado. This card is really good because when you have a rank 4 Xyz, you can overlay it on top of this. This thing has piercing, and it turns one of your Zoodiac Xyz that may have 0 attack into a 2,500 beater, which is really good for closing a damage threshold if you need to. And then the last one that came up is this is Dingirsu Orchist, the Evening Star. This is a level 8, and sometimes you'd end up with it's a rank 8, and sometimes you'll end up with an awkward position to where you might have like an alpha and a kaiju because they're all level 8, and you can overlay into this, and what it does is it can send a monster non-targeting to the graveyard from the field, which is a great way to clear all those monsters that have built-in protection. But also, if your board were to get wiped, you can detach a material from this to protect it. So it it did have utility. It came up once, but it was just kind of a spot filler that I needed to put for the 15th card, and I didn't want to just cram it with the one last Zoodiac XZ. And then last we have the side deck. Now this is kind of where I fell short because I'm not familiar with the meta and what's the most popular. I know the popular decks, but I really had to decide on what I think that I would have the most trouble with, and I needed to plan accordingly. So after some of the playtesting that I did, I discovered that branded was probably my worst matchup, because once that deck gets rolling out of the extra deck and they can establish things, if you send them to the graveyard, it doesn't really matter how, they can keep going. And that was the problem that I had. So with that being said, I decided to side deck 3-dimensional barrier and then 2 Soul Drain. Essentially, Dimensional Barrier can just turn off any extra summon or extra deck summoning mechanic, XZ, Synchro, whatever, aside from Link. And then Soul Drain specifically hits decks that resolve in the graveyard. So that would take care of certain decks, maybe like Dragon Link. It would also take care of the branded deck, because all of their fusions, when they go to fusion summon, they resolve in the graveyard. So if you flip this and you turn it off, which it did happen once in the tournament, I was able to turn off basically their entire deck, and within 2 turns I was in OTK range. So that's really what you want in this deck. You want to be able, and not only that, but this deck is hard built to go second, so you want to have something to side in to go first in case they figure out what you're onto. So that's it for those. The next ones were just extra hand traps. You really wanted to make sure you can cover all your matchups, so I played 3 Ghost Ogre, the 3rd Droll, and the 3rd Nib. This was just for odd matchups to catch random things. This is when I ran into a deck that's going to search a lot, and this is when I ran into a deck that mass special summons, which in hindsight I probably could have played the 3rd one of either one of these in the main deck, but I'm not sad about my choice because I didn't want to brick on them. Then we have the last Lightning Storm to help clear things. Back row is the bane of our existence, so we want to make sure we can clear it. We don't want anything to interrupt our Zoodiac establishment, so we want to be able to clear any back row. And then the last one is evenly matched. So if we find ourselves in a point to where they establish multiple negates and we need that 1/3 follow-up card, a Kaiju, Book of Moon doesn't do it. We want to make sure we have something that can really close out the deal. So evenly matched is that card that really just allows you to level the playing field. They are forced to play with what's just in their hand, and hopefully at that point, with all of your interactions and everything, you were able to force them into a point to where what's in their hand is 2 to 3 cards, because usually after you've broken their board, that's really all you have left, and you want to make sure that what you establish on the field is going to be able to take care of what they have left, and whatever's in your hand will be either a 1-card follow-up or something that's going to interrupt them, a hand trap, a Zoodiac, or a Kaiju. That's really what you wanted with this deck. Overall, I don't really think I changed anything in the deck besides the Bunny Blasts. I feel like if I would have gotten paired against a Runic player, I would have done pretty bad in that aspect. But let's talk about my matchups. So we'll make this really quick because I don't want this video to go any longer than it has to. Round 1, I got a bye. I got there right before cutoff, and I was the last player to enter, and they just gave me a bye, so I was already going in with a win. Second round, I got matched up against Kashtira Scareclaw, and I won game 1 pretty easily as they didn't really know what I was doing. Game 2, they took it because I just bricked really hard. I opened up nothing but destruction with no follow-up, no Zoodiac, no Kaiju, no nothing. So once they expended my hand traps and stuff like that, I was done. And then game 3, I really just needed a Zoodiac. I had everything else in my hand to break their board, to establish my own board, except a Zoodiac card. And the Zoodiac card was the one thing I needed. Unfortunately, I didn't draw that Zoodiac card in time, and they were able to just OTK me on the next turn, which is unfortunate, but it is. So after round 2, out of a 7-round tournament, I was 1-1 technically. Game 3, I went into playing against Dinos, and I managed to 2-0 them. It was a pretty easy victory on my end because they're built to go second, I'm built to go second, but if I win the dice roll, I'm going to make them go first, and their first turn board isn't really that good at protection as their second turn board is, especially when I can just break what they have, and that's what my deck was meant to do. We did almost go to a game 3, but luckily I was able to pull it out with an evenly matched, which if you know anything about Dinos, Miscellaneous Source doesn't protect in the battle phase, which means I was able to wipe his entire field, and he didn't establish a token on my side of the field, so I was able to evenly match him and just take control from there. Game 3, I played against Kashtira. That was a pretty quick 2-0. It was pure, but I was able to establish everything very quickly, and they didn't let me go first at any point. They always wanted me to go second both games, which was favorable for me, and I was able to quickly establish things, and Kashtira monsters can't resolve resolve their effects if they're not face up on the field at resolution of like Zeus or anything like that. So it was very easy for me to clear their board. Then we had a lunch. That was pretty quick, about 30 minutes or so like that. I came back and I got paired with the Sprite player. That was a pretty long match. That was the first match. I actually had danger in going in the time in. And well, needless to say, it was a grind, but I was able to grind it out and take the win at the end of everything. But it was interesting playing against that deck because Nibiru is basically useless for that if they establish, you know, sprites, gigantic sprite or whatever it's called. But it was fun nonetheless. The player was really good, really skilled. I actually didn't think I would win because of the skill level that he had and because I was out for all the time that I was. And then for the last two matches, I played against another Kashtira. That one I unfortunately lost. It literally came down to whether or not I was going to draw the out for his Arise Heart, and I did not draw the out for his Arise Heart, and he was able to banish my one Zoodiac that I had in my hand, and unfortunately that was it. I couldn't win that one. And then round 7, final round, I ended up playing against a Dogmatica player, which is the Dogmatica Ritual deck. I never played against it before. I didn't really know what was going on, and apparently that thing has some massive rituals that if you allow them to get on the field, they destroy your extra deck, and unfortunately most of my power comes from the extra deck, so he was able to quickly snipe all my Zeuses, my important Zoodiac cards. So I was really just playing with my main deck at that point. Unfortunately, I got 2-0'd in that match. It was still fun, don't get me wrong. It's just I wasn't expecting to play against anything Dogmatica related, and because he was able to wipe my extra deck so thoroughly, it just made it kind of impossible to play on my side because a lot of my power comes from there. So it is what it is. It's part of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! You can't plan for everything. After that, unfortunately, my record was X3, so I did better than half, which I think is phenomenal considering I haven't really played in 3 years and I had really no play testing. The fact that I can just go into a tournament with high-level players and still be able to play something competent, even though it really shouldn't do that well, was something that I really enjoyed, and it's something that I might want to do again. I ended up getting like 40-something place out of everything because of all the tiebreakers. Because it was a smaller tournament, they only gave out to top 16. I barely made it to the second tables, basically spots 20 and up, and that's where I kind of spent most of my day. But either way, it was fun. I enjoyed myself, and I figured you guys might like something like this. So that's all I had for you guys, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this content, maybe I'll consider making another channel just for my Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, but I really hope that you enjoyed it. I really hope that you guys liked walking down my thought process on things, and if this is something that you guys really do like seeing, then let's get this video to like 500 likes, let's say that. And then from there on out, I'll probably post a couple of content, maybe some online play or something. I don't really know, but we'll just see where this goes. It's just something I'm putting out there because it was something I had fun with. But anyway, I will catch you guys in the next video, and thank you for all of the support.